Okay, we will get started. I think some more people are joining, but we'll get started. It's everybody's Friday afternoon. So I'm going to talk to you today about a therapeutic approach to behaviour management, and it's going to be very much focused on the school model of behaviour management. As many of you will be aware, this sort of wraps up our first ever National Behaviour Awareness Week, and we've been doing a lot of webinars this week and various different talks across the Northwest and some nationally around understanding behaviour and the need behind behaviour. And I am going to be talking today just about different ways in which we can approach behaviour, so we can kind of move away from the more punitive approaches that are currently in place across the country. So what the world looks like today, um, generally there's a standard model of how behaviour is managed across schools. You usually have the negative behaviour points, you have detention, stepping up to isolation, then you've got the manage move and step out plans if things are not going well at school, trialing some time at another setting. You've got fixed term exclusions and you've got permanent exclusions. And that's the standard kind of process that most schools, most mainstream schools follow across the country, that's kind of been within our system embedded for a very, very long time. And what that kind of tends to focus on is the punitive element and very much a consequential led approach rather than a therapeutic and understanding approach. And what that does, it tends to ignite further worry in the young people, anxiety, embarrassment. It can add to low self-esteem, shame, sometimes anger, sadness. Obviously, when you're looking at managed moves and step outs and exclusions, consideration around attachment difficulties, the fear factor of the unknown, and a lack of confidence in the young people being able to succeed, progress, and do well. There's quite a lot of reasons behind behaviour, but there's kind of five real main ones that we kind of need to be looking at mostly. A lot of the time we see behaviour as a result of unmet or unidentified need. And that certainly is a lot more common these days as we are starting to move towards a society that's more understanding of neurodivergent children. And lots of reasons behind why there is more neurodiversity due to the awareness of that, the understanding of that. And obviously lots of different things in respect of the technical era with the technology, the additional information that our children and young people are taking on board in their minds. So I read somewhere not long ago that the children and young people of today are retaining 85% more information on a daily basis than someone like myself would have had to retain at their age. And I'm almost 40. Due to all of the additional advertisement, social media platforms, and actually it's a lot of scientific research going into that at the moment in respect of what impact that's having on our children's brains and the different wiring that is required as a result of the additional information that they are having to take in. Obviously, there's sensory difficulties that a lot of people may not take full consideration about. So you may have a child that is displaying behaviours that are becoming unmanageable, but have we explored what they may be struggling with? So are they struggling with how uncomfortable their uniform might be if they do have some undetected sensory difficulties, the noise of the classroom? Are we as schools kind of really looking into all of this before we start sanctioning behaviour, as what it might be is behaviour that they actually cannot help, and they may not be able to identify that themselves, so they potentially can't articulate what it is that's bothering them, that's kind of increasing their anxiety. As a result, we're seeing those behaviours. So what we're then seeing is them trying to tell us via their behaviour as opposed to telling us via their voice, because they may not be able to understand or recognise those things themselves. Obviously, there's trauma, so we don't know what's going on for a young person outside of school. Anxiety, there could be bullying involved, there could be situations going on at home that we don't know about. And what they're actually doing is demonstrating via their behaviours that they're not coping, or that something's bothering them, or they're worried about something. And something that there's more awareness of recently, but not really enough awareness of, is that you can actually have trauma-based behaviours as a result of unmet need. And that's becoming quite common, particularly in mainstream settings, is if there is an unmet or unidentified need that we're not taken into consideration, but we're continually sanctioning that behaviour, that can develop a longer term trauma for those young people and impact lots of different things psychologically for them. So it's just being fully aware of all of that. There's lots of other things that can also impact the behaviour. So obviously, hunger can have an adverse effect on a lot of young people, but certainly young people who are neurodivergent. Tiredness, are they getting enough sleep? Have they got anxiety, or is that affecting their sleeping patterns, which is ultimately affecting their mood and tiredness levels when they're in school? Are they worried about something? Is there a big event happening in their life? There could be anything going on within their family or with a friend. Are we actually taking time as professionals to kind of look into why this behaviour is presenting, rather than sort of going to our default behaviour policy and following those behaviour policy points and plans that we've got in place? What are we doing as professionals and adults to understand their behaviour? Because it is our responsibility as professionals to lead the way, really, and to kind of understand what's going on for the children and young people that we're there to support. And I know that's really difficult, certainly in the climate that everybody is working in, but just taking a little bit of time to sort of really understand that young person and why they might be presenting a certain way. Just even one conversation could help, and completely change the trajectory for that young person, by taking some time to listen and understand. They could be finding the work hard, and what you're seeing is a shame response. So, certainly, you've got the standard phrase of the class clown, or your usual distractors that that a lot of people talk about over the years with young people in classes. But is there a reason for that? Are they trying to distract from the fact that they're really struggling with the work and they don't actually know how to do it? So instead, they're trying to redirect the attention, and any sort of focus on them is good focus for them, because actually then it's not focus on what they can't do. And that obviously feeds into their low confidence as well. So just a reminder around going back to all of those different sanctions that we currently have in our behaviour policies in schools, and what that can kind of trigger for a lot of the young people that we support. And there is a lot of research around this. So there's research on detentions, there's research on isolations, and I would urge everybody to kind of go and have a look on Google and search for studies. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of studies over the past couple of decades on whether the sanctions that are instilled in schools work or make a difference in respect of behaviour particularly, and majority of them show that they actually don't, and in a lot of cases they increase problematic behaviour. So this was one study just specifically focusing on detentions, and the link is there at the bottom, so you can go and find it if you wanted to read it into more detail. But the study looked at how 314 8 to 14-year-olds in one school responded to detention, suspensions, and other sanctions. And they identified three groups. So one group didn't receive a sanction at all, another group received sanctions in autumn but not in spring, and another group received sanctions in autumn and in spring, which you can see presented there, all the different groups on that graph. And the conclusion of that study was that a wealth of evidence that focuses on punishment alone will not impact many offences, nor will they re-educate the offender or the young person. In many cases, they increase problematic behaviour, which goes back to what we were just talking about, because those sanctions increase anxiety, they increase worry, they increase shame responses, and that then kind of leads into a bit of a cycle. So again, there was isolation studies, and there are loads of these. One as recently as September 2023, if you want to have a look at the most recent research on this. And Schools Week published a paper on They did a study on over 2/3 of the country's largest academy trusts, and the schools that use some form of isolation, although varying labels, from inclusion units and consequence booths, timeout spaces, calm rooms. Um, Generally, primary pupils can be removed for a maximum of half a day, and secondary pupils for up to a week. And just something to consider here is a lot of children and young people struggling to engage in education, certainly more so on the back of COVID and lockdown, and reintegrating back into the education system. And quite a lot of parent carers that we work with, and I also myself have some lived experience of this particular situation, is that, they may have children or young people that are struggling with anxiety in respect of integrating back into school. And for a variety of reasons, there's obviously anxiety-based school avoidance. And some parents spend quite a lot of the time in the mornings really, really trying to positively encourage their children to go to school. And sometimes, some children won't get to school until 11 o'clock, sometimes halfway through the day. But when they get there, what you tend to find is there are lots of sanctions around lateness or attendance, and that can also impact on the shame response. And if it's taken that child all the time to get to school in the first place, and then they get to school and they get a detention for being late, it completely undoes all of that work to try and encourage them to attend school and to be social and to learn. And we really need to be thinking about how we can be more flexible for these young people, because, attending school is a big part of their life. And it gets to a point sometimes, and there's hundreds and hundreds of examples of this across the country, probably thousands actually, where some children just stop attending school altogether because no matter how hard they tried, they then receive the sanctions. Or if they turn up and their uniform isn't quite right, it's taken them everything to get there, and then are given a detention for not having the right uniform or not wearing a tie. And we really need to be thinking about how we can be a lot more flexible around that, really, and really understanding the children that are coming into our schools as to what has it taken that morning to them actually get there. What can we do to make them have a positive experience in school, and do some of these things actually matter in the grand scheme of things? And certainly when it comes to isolation, if you have children and young people who are struggling to engage in education, or they're triggering lots of behaviour points and they're having lots of detentions and they're struggling with their work and they're distracting in class, the outcome is to then put them in isolation, which takes them out of education again, when what we're trying to do is encourage them to engage in education positively. And how could that possibly be a positive? So it's just sort of rethinking how we can transform this now and make a real difference for these children that are struggling so much. So in this study, obviously, both maintained schools and academies use isolation spaces, but academies are actually more likely to do so, according to the research. However, most schools don't have evidence that any strategies actually work around isolation. A lot of good schools know that isolation rooms can be overly detrimental to a pupil's well-being. And what we've got to consider is this a deprivation of liberty? The actual categorisation of a deprivation of liberty is where the child is under continuous supervision or control and the child is not free to leave. So really sort of being mindful, if we do need to look at any form of isolation for safety reasons or risk management reasons or for well-being, sometimes being in a crowded room might not be good for that young person. Are we doing that in the right way? Are we looking at this positively? So, I mean, like I say, there's so much research in respect of isolation and in respect of sanctions and consequences and detention. There's a Forbes research that concluded the use of isolation as a disciplinary measure risk damaging children's mental health and can end up making behavioural problems worse as students become more disaffected from school, according to the study. When done in the wrong way, segregating children can have the opposite of the intended effect, making them feel distressed, traumatised, and potentially worsening their mental health, behaviour, and ability to excel in school. And the National Institute of Health concluded very recently at both primary and secondary school, children who were socially isolated experience greater mental health difficulties, and children with behavioural problems or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder symptoms at the age of 5 years had an elevated risk of becoming more socially isolated at the age of 12. So there was a lot of alternatives to sanctioning behaviour, and we are wanting to encourage a more therapeutic approach to behaviour in all schools across the country. And we have actually written to the government in order to try and get this kind of more of a statutory expectation that we have a more therapeutic approach to behaviour. And it's all about listening to the young people. Like I said before, take time out to try and listen and understand, what does the world look like for them? What have they been through that morning? What are they going through at home? What is going on in their friendship group? How do they feel in themselves? Know the full context of who they are as a person, rather than defaulting to the behaviour policy and following those kind of trajectories. Take time to have conversations with them. I know that's very, very difficult, especially in the current climate, but just one small conversation with a young person could completely change their mindset and completely help with how they approach school and how they behave in school, understand the why and support them and help to build their confidence. And there's lots of different ways in which this can happen. So one school had, rather than a detention, they had a what is my purpose session to help the young person with a deeper understanding of themselves, help with the wider understanding of the world, why they're in school, what they want to achieve, giving them positive reinforcement of that they can achieve. And there's other ways in which we can support them with games of laughter to encourage positive conversations. And there's various games, and you can Google, if you want to Google games of laughter around therapeutic behaviour management. There's lots of suggestions on there, but you've got Mad Dragon, The Art of Conversation, Tatika. There's think sheets in order to help them sort of articulate. Help, you may need to scribe for them, expecting them to write down. Some children can't do that or struggle with that, so offer to scribe for them. And then that will also help you build those relationships and understanding with the children that you're supporting. Various activities, so link it to something positive rather than it being negative and very punitive. Look at how we can help with their physical health and confidence. So sport, drama, games. A lot of children who do demonstrate poor behaviour have creative minds and probably struggle academically. So how can you tap into that? How, lots of young people like to rap, or they might like to write poetry, thoughtful writing. Art therapy is also a really good one. And it's about how we can kind of really pull out the best in them. And can you rethink how they are accessing education? And I know it's difficult with the framework that we're working in, but it's our responsibility as professionals to advocate for our children in order to get the best out of them, rather than expecting them to be an all-rounder and attend every single lesson. Actually, do they excel in a certain area? Do they have a creative mind? Can we do something with that and help with their confidence? Ultimately, they'll start to achieve a lot more, and then that will help build their confidence that they can achieve. And one of the most important things, really, as professionals and adults, we need to admit, sometimes when we're having a bad day, sometimes we might overreact. We might be busy. We might have lots going on. Sometimes we get things wrong. And it's really important that we demonstrate that to our children and young people, because we're expecting them to conform to society, because that is the society that we currently live in. But actually, we're all human and we don't always get things right. And it's really important that we model that for our young people and that we tell them sometimes if we've overreacted or maybe we shouldn't have gone down that route. And maybe, we need to reflect a little bit on how we can be better as teachers or as professionals. And that's something that's probably one of the most important things that we can take away from today is just demonstrate to our children that actually not everybody is perfect and sometimes we get things wrong too, and that will also give them the encouragement to do the same and be able to reflect. And by doing all of this and listening to them, you are more likely to see um, the young people feeling important, feeling wanted, feeling understood, feeling heard, feeling happier. They're more likely to open up to us as professionals. We're more likely to be able to identify need that we may not have seen before. We're more likely to see the behaviours decrease if they feel that somebody is listening to them and giving them that time. And we're giving them time to explain. And we also might make them feel a lot more comfortable to make disclosures because there could be a lot more going on for that young person than we think. So I would encourage everybody to go and look for therapeutic thinking tools and strategies online. And this is a really good way to completely change up how we're working in respect of behaviour, particularly in schools. Therapeutic thinking is an approach. So it's an approach that everybody has to deliver, very like the whole school send approach, the trauma-informed approach. And it prioritises the pro-social feelings of everyone within the dynamic. And it's based on the principle that negative experiences create negative feelings create negative behaviour, but positive experiences create positive feelings, and positive feelings create positive behaviour. Children that have risk factors in their lives are more likely to have negative feelings and are therefore more likely to display negative behaviours. Whilst an educational setting cannot eradicate all the risk factors of a child may have experienced or be experiencing, it can look to ensure the child has many protective factors and positive experiences as possible in order to create more positive feelings within them. So the approach supports settings to create clear behaviour policies that outline how staff should respond to incidents of behaviour that are not pro-social. So even the language around the therapeutic thinking model is a lot more positive. Where a consequence is required in order to address a behaviour, it must always be a learning consequence, a logical action which supports the child to understand their behaviour and to learn new skills if needed. If a protective consequence is needed to ensure safety, this is only ever alongside a learning consequence so that the freedom can be returned to the child as soon as possible. Therapeutic thinking challenges the concepts of bribes and sanctions used to manage behaviour, which can lead to some children only being able to maintain this between 9 and 3, Monday to Friday, term time only, when the systems are in place around them. So when we've got a very punitive, sanction-led model, a lot of people will have heard of the Coca-Cola effect, where everybody says, oh, the child is absolutely fine in school, we're not seeing any of these behaviours at school, and parents are coming to us and saying, well, actually at home it's absolutely awful and I'm really struggling, and they're describing a child that we don't recognise, but that's because the systems that are in place around them are instilling fear in order to not receive those sanctions, and that they're able to manage that and mask that for very short periods of time during the day. And then all of those behaviours, anxieties and worries come out when they get home, when they're in their safe space. So rather than them having to mask in school and then all of that come out at home, where they would classify that as their safe space, and for some children it wouldn't be the safe space, so they wouldn't be able to let that out anywhere. Let school also be that safe space. Therapeutic thinking provides various tools to enable the analysis of behaviour. So it's understanding the behaviour rather than just treating the behaviour. So treating the cause, not just the symptom. And therefore, to assist in better planning to prevent difficult or dangerous situations from occurring and to highlight the learning or experience needed. Within the training, clear links are made to the new Ofsted framework, and links are also made with the Department for Education document Mental Health and Behaviour in Schools 2018, which I would encourage you all to read. So When I was looking online to see how many schools are actually adopting therapeutic behaviour policies, they are very few and far between. But I think we're definitely in a society now where people are wanting to look at different ways to support our young people. And during COVID, we did say we would do things differently now. However, a big focus was government led in respect of the attainment gap. So what we need to start thinking now is really how we support our young people, their mental health and their mental well-being. And I found a behaviour policy from John Rankin Schools, and you can Google, and there's a whole document, it's 21-page document, so I won't go through it all today. There are some parts of the document I don't necessarily promote, but there are some really good things that you can pull from this document in respect of how to manage behaviour in a therapeutic way. And it's all very child centred. It talks about what everybody is responsible for, making sure the professionals are role modelling. Everybody in the setting will have to take this approach, and it's all very pro-social. And it also explains a lot of the behaviours and what to look out for. It talks about different uses of language, what we should say instead of what we say these days, very much sit down, be quiet. There's lots of alternatives within this document of what we could be saying to our young people that potentially wouldn't trigger that shame response. So I'd encourage you all to go and find that. And there's other examples online, and we will be posting some on our website as well that you'll be able to pull from and hopefully try and introduce into your schools. We have a lot of resources, free resources on our website. So if you go to our resources and downloads page on greatmindstogether.co.uk, you can access, there's hundreds and hundreds of resources where you can use them to work with the young people. So our growth mindset workbook, our anxiety workbook, you can download them all completely free of charge. And there's lots of links to different websites with some really good resources as well. And that's a really good way. There's activities within all of the resources that we have there. That's a really good way to sort of trigger conversations and try and understand the children and young people, and some really good prompts and worksheets that you can use. I would always recommend that we look at activity-based and practical sessions as opposed to sit down, fill out worksheets. More interactions and conversations is what we need. And Autism Central of Parents and Carers as well. So there's autismcentral.org.uk is the website, and there's lots and lots of free webinars and sessions on there in respect of understanding need behind behaviour and understanding how to support our parents and carers and also our children and young people. So I'd encourage everybody to go and have a look at all of those and access any of them. And you can contact us directly as well if you need any more ideas in respect of behaviour policies. And if you would like some support from Great Minds Together in writing a therapeutic behaviour policy, we would be more than happy to support with that completely free of charge, of course. So there is our website and phone number, and my name is Emma Mander. So if anybody would like to contact me directly or ask any questions, you're very welcome to. My email address is emmamander@gmt.team. If anybody wants to ask any questions in the question and answer section, you're very welcome to, but I'm aware it's everybody's Friday afternoon, so you may all want to get going.